Hello, everyone. This is your host, Taha Kehar. Welcome to another exciting episode of The Bridge Writers in Conversation. Today, we'll be speaking to Haris Khalique, Pakistani poet. Before I begin the conversation, I would like to tell my viewers that Haris Khalique is a Pakistani poet in Urdu, English, and Punjabi. I don't know if I'm missing a language here, but is that, yeah?
That's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it. In addition to being an essayist and a columnist for Dawn currently, Khalique has authored 9 collections of poetry and 2 books of nonfiction. In March 2018, he received the Presidential Pride of Performance Award from Pakistan as an acknowledgement of his contribution to poetry. In 2013, he was awarded the UBL Literary Excellence Award in the category of Urdu poetry for his collection Mele Mein. He is also a University of Iowa Honorary Fellow in Writing. Am I missing something? Or is that?
No, thank you very much. You've been very generous in introducing me.
I'm glad. So Haris Saab, you're essentially a multilingual poet. So can you tell me a little bit about how each of the languages you speak and write in have enriched your work and influenced it to a large extent?
Thank you, Taha. I think this is the standard question that I'm asked in most interviews. If it is not the first question, then people certainly get somehow, people find it exotic if somebody is writing in more than one languages. But this is something really new in our part of the world. I mean, we have been multilingual people since ever, and it is actually quite unfortunate that we have become from multilingual, we were reduced to being bilingual, and then to monolingual, and then actually, basically, there is no one language one can express oneself properly in. I mean, if you look at the kind of writing and it's not about literary writing I'm speaking about, it's generally, people actually have very little language skills left. I was not trained in language or literature. So it's all, I mean, by training, I mean that I'm not schooled. I mean, after grade 12, I haven't read languages or literature in school. And I think that was the case for most of the people, if not in my generation, also people older than me. I mean, people would keep reading and writing things that interested them, and literature interested many of them. So, people would continue to hone their skills, as it were, and increasing their knowledge and ability to think and reflect. And so multilingual being coming to your question, you see, I started writing in Urdu. That was my, first language of creative expression. But the language I was being, trained in was English. So it's interesting that I was reading English more, but I started writing in Urdu. I think the influence was of my parents and generally the people around me in the literary circles in which I was fortunate enough to be exposed to since I was young. And most of them in Pakistan, of course, around us were people writing in Urdu or in Sindhi, or some were writing in English as well. Among my father did. I mean, he was writing film scripts in English, but basically that was also a creative form of writing. But he was writing poetry in Urdu. So I started writing in Urdu, but very soon I started translating work from other languages, particularly English, or languages available to us, literary writing available to us from other languages through English. And I started translating those in Urdu just for couple of years. And then I started writing in English myself. And soon after, I started writing in Punjabi. But I haven't written as much as I've written in Urdu and English. So I can't really claim to have been writing in Punjabi regularly, but occasionally I've been writing in Punjabi. And my latest collection, which is the 10th poetry collection that I came out with, 6th in Urdu, has about 11 or 12 Punjabi poems included. So it does, I think the language is not just simply a medium. Language brings a certain sensibility and a certain, character and culture with it. So that actually enriches how you look at the world, and that helps you become more plural and understand diversity and appreciate diversity. So I can also read a couple of other languages that we speak in Pakistan, but I have written in English, Urdu, and Punjabi. And I also look at English as one of our languages now. I mean, it is spoken by a very small minority or understood by a minority, but I do think that it is one of the languages that Pakistanis speak, and we should recognize that. So, being multilingual is more important. I mean, if you're able to read in more than one languages, is I think more important than being able to write more than one languages. So I think that has enriched me more. Being able to read Sindhi fiction in Sindhi, or being able to read Saraiki poetry in Punjabi actually has helped me a lot, because there's a lot that Pakistan has to offer, Pakistani literary landscape has to offer, but unfortunately, because of Urdu and English, and now more so English, the genius that is being realized, the literary genius that is being realized in our languages, in our other national languages, is not being recognized.
There are many people who believe that English has replaced Persian in many ways for us. Do you think that in itself has, left us a little poorer than we were otherwise?
Well, I mean, I actually agree with that line of thinking. I think English has replaced. You see, every language, and particularly in languages where where knowledge is not generated, unfortunately, and there's little philosophy, and there's little sciences. So such languages need support languages, and English and Persian was, our support language, for want of a better term, for hundreds of years. And for South Asian Muslims, not just for South Asian Muslims, but for people of other faiths and kingdoms and native states, which were run by rulers of other faiths, were also using Persian for a very long time for governance. So it was a language of knowledge and a language of governance. Mm-hmm. That has been replaced by English, and I think it is not. I don't think it makes us poorer. It makes us poorer in some ways, and it makes us richer in some other ways. Okay. Because English is a much bigger language in terms of accessing the rest of the world, which Persian perhaps was at one point in our history, but it is not anymore. Urdu, for instance, is a bigger language than Persian in terms of the sheer number of people speaking it, because the number of people who speak Urdu as their mother tongue are in a minority. If you compare, if you look at the total number of people speaking Urdu. So English I think, makes us richer if we have to learn physics, if we have to learn philosophy, if we have to learn economics or sociology. But when it comes to literature, because there is very, I think what I would call it, the relationship between Urdu and Persian is like the relationship between Sindhi, Punjabi, and Urdu. The linguistic affinity that enriches each of these languages, because they are siblings. That is of course not there with English, because the structure, the vocabulary, the syntax is different. But English can actually enrich us through introducing us to literatures being written in other languages. That is one thing that I really admire about the language that English has become. And it's a source of bringing humanity together also. I mean, it was an imperial language. It still is in many ways, but it has also brought us together.
Indeed. So let's get back to your poetry. What initially compelled you to write poetry? And when
I never thought about it. I actually never thought about it, but what compelled me to write poetry, I just started enjoying. I used to read a lot of poetry, as I told you, and I still read a lot of poetry, more than I read fiction. Although I do read fiction also, and I'm looking forward to reading all the 4 stories that you have contributed to the bridge, Taha. and I've been following you and other younger writers and really, talented writers that we have in fiction. But I read more poetry compared to fiction, and so perhaps I started writing short stories and non-fiction essays and short stories initially, both in English and Urdu. But then very soon I switched to writing poetry, and I think it just happened. I don't know what compelled me to. It's just something that I fancied since I was young. I mean, I used to like a lot of not like. I mean, I learned by heart a lot of classical Urdu and Persian verse when I was young. So I think that had an impact.
That probably had an impact. So
Yeah.
over time, since you began writing poetry, do you think the scope for writing poetry in Pakistan's multilingual landscape has evolved? Do you think more people are writing poetry now, or do you think there's been there's a poverty in that respect?
If you look at since you asked me about the multilingual poetic, sort of how poetry has evolved in different languages. I think, in fact, I mean, I'm a poet, but I understand that a language or a culture develops with prose, with serious prose, with imaginative prose, and we lack in that area. If you look at for instance, if you look at our languages, I mean, the number of people speaking our languages, I mean, from Urdu and to other languages, and you look at the number of fiction writers that we have produced over the years, that's been really, you can count them on your fingertips,
Exactly.
the major ones. So we lack more in fiction than in poetry, which we should worry about, really. I mean, because prose is equally important, and not just fiction, non-fiction as well. Both academic, scholarly non-fiction and creative non-fiction. When it comes to poetry, I think it is still a very rich scene. And I mean, I can name people, but due to paucity of time, I won't be able to name everybody, and then my friends will get happy if I forget to name
By all
them.
means, take the time to name them. Yeah.
But if you look at all the languages, I mean, there's that we speak. I mean, all 10, 15 major languages, and I mean, I can't say all the 60, 70 languages that we speak, but the 10, 15 major languages, or 7 or 8 really big languages that we speak. I mean, it's a really rich scene when it comes to poetry, and you find new people coming up, and particularly in metropolitan Pakistan, so to speak, young people, or not young people, but younger people writing in English has also increased quite substantially over the years, and it is good. But I just think that people who are writing in English have to create a relationship which goes beyond using individual words to spice their verse. They have to create that relationship with the habitat. I mean, if you're writing in Khairpur, then you have to be able to write in Khairpur, and your poetry, will get more flavor and will get rich if you understand your habitat better. So that is something with the English writers. But otherwise, I think it is evolving. It has evolved. Poetry runs in our blood in this part of the world. In what I call the Indus Valley, or the Indo-Gangetic Plains, or the Persia, the Indo-Persian sort of region. I think poetry runs in our blood. So I'm not pessimistic at all. You don't get to produce a Faiz Faiz every 5 years, so you have to understand that. But there are really good, talented people who are writing in our languages.
So with respect to English poetry, do you feel that it has the power to challenge social and political oppression in societies like ours?
I think it has. I mean, it is embarrassing to speak about your own work, but the last collection, that I did, the No Fortunes to Tell, it's all resistance poetry, or largely resistance poetry or war poems. Okay. So it is absolutely possible, and it has to do with the content, the themes that you take up, and the sensibility that you have to offer. So it is possible that English becomes a language of resistance. It hasn't been as much as yet. because it is used by very few people, and unfortunately, it is also seen as a language of the elites of Pakistan, and not just in Pakistan, South Asia, or the colonies, the former British colonies. So if it is naturalized, indigenized, then it will. I mean, I don't think English can. Any language stops you from giving voice to the voiceless and making the invisible visible. So I think English can, definitely do that. Our writers must think about it.
So tell me a bit more about this previous book you're talking about, resistance poetry. What were the themes you explored specifically? Yeah.
It came out in 2019. No Fortunes to Tell, published by Folio Books, Lahore.
Okay.
And because if you look at the post 9/11 world, and you look at the kind of new waves of terrorism across Pakistan and the region and the world, of course. So the poems in the book are about, for instance, what happened in Aleppo, in Syria. There are poems about Waziristan, Seven Sharif, the bomb blast. There's a longish, if not long, a longish poem about Seven Sharif. And there are poems about these bomb blasts and the tragedies that were inflicted. I mean, the suffering that was inflicted on common people by the powers that be. So it is, and how people have suffered, how people, as I was saying, of the voiceless and the invisible. I mean, their suffering, and also the victims of blasphemy law, Asia Bibi, for instance, and there are poems about and other poems. I mean, I've also invoked history. I mean, speaking about Karbala and contemporizing it in some sense. So there are poems about war and suffering and resistance to power in this collection. It's a slim collection, but these are the kind of poems I've written, and there are, I think, other people who have started writing on these themes as well.
Fascinating. So you've also written nonfiction. What led to that? I believe the only book I read by you was Crimson Papers, and there's another one, I believe. I forget the title. If you could tell everyone. I've been, and it is quite interesting again, and I think it's not something to be proud of, but it is a handicap that prose, most of my, 90%, if not 95%, I've written in English. So I've been a prose writer in English mostly, and so Crimson Papers you have read. I mean, Crimson Papers are 4 long essays. And there was another book that I did, co-authored with an Indian friend and writer, friend of mine. She was my classmate also. It's called Unfinished Histories. It came out in 2002. It was about separation, belonging, the issues of separation and belonging in the Indian and Pakistani diaspora, and looking at those issues of diaspora, because it was written in the late 1990s, and that generation was still alive, which had seen both 1947 and 1971. I mean, there still are many people who have seen 1971, but there are fewer people who have seen 1947. It was about multiple migrations. It was about separation and belonging. It was about the baggage that our diaspora carries in terms of the two partitions of the Indian subcontinent. I think there's very little. I mean, the kind of tragedy, human tragedy. I mean, it was independence for two states in 47, 2 nations or 2 states. And it was independence for another state in 1971. But the kind of human tragedy that people have spoken about it, films are being made. There's a lot of short fiction, particularly in Urdu. The progress, from Manto to Krishan Chand. I mean, there are so many from that period.
who have written about 1947. There is very little written about 1971, but I think there needs to be more, recalling of those events and learning from those events, catastrophic events, and I think in some sense, 47 and 71 were no less than the Holocaust in Eastern Europe, in Germany, in Eastern Europe, in Poland, etc. And I think that needs to be explored further, because I think since our wounds are not healed, the 1947 and the 1971 wounds are neither healed, nor there has been a closure brought to the partition of India and the dismemberment of Pakistan. So I think that's why we continue doing what we are doing, and that is why we continue to repeat the same mistakes and bring suffering on our people, because we have not resolved what happened in 47 and in 1971. So that is what the book is about. But it is life writing. It is about individuals. It is about people, some professor or some cook, or some different kinds of people, or a lady visiting her grandchildren in somewhere in Western Europe. That is about, so Unfinished Histories is about that, and Crimson Papers is more about Pakistan. I mean, what has happened in Pakistan between 1947 and 2017, the first 70 years.
So did you ever contemplate a career as a fiction writer?
I started writing short stories when I was a teenager, but I soon left that. And I think I leave it to people like you, who are far more talented than I am when it comes to writing fiction.
That's not possible. You should write fiction.
No, I don't know. I mean, maybe at some point I start writing fiction. But if you look at the poems that I write, particularly the character-based poems that I have written in Urdu, they are kind of versified short fiction also. I mean, not exactly, but the term that I can coin off the top of my head is that they are actually versified short stories. Some of the poems that I've written. So there's an element of storytelling in my poetry also.
That's excellent. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Bridge. So in what ways can platforms like the Bridge, which operate online and in print, inspire aspiring poets and writers to effectively contribute to Pakistan's literary landscape? And in what ways do you feel such platforms can have an impact?
I think it's highly commendable, and it's really admirable that younger people. When I say younger people, I mean people who are younger than me, the generation after me, or few years younger to me. They are using social media platforms, or creating social media platforms, to further the cause of art and literature. And because literature brings people together, art brings people together. I mean, I believe in political writing, and and I think politics is very important. But I also understand that politics divides people, whereas art brings them together. And whether it is painting or music or sculpture or a song that you compose, or a piece of poetry, I mean, they are shared. Humanity shares those emotions and those feelings. So it is important. And why shouldn't we take advantage of the social media platforms that are made available to us? Because not everybody can fly to New York or fly to Brazil that easily and meet poets there. But online you can. So I really congratulate the Bridge team for taking this initiative.
So my final question to you is a very stereotypical question that everyone asks. What advice would you give aspiring poets and writers?
Well, I think they should read.
They should read.
Read more and more. Yeah. And think, of course, and then write. Read and reflect, and then write. And I think reading is very important, and also something that is, as I said, particularly because you're conducting this interview in English, and many of the people that who would watch us would be budding or aspiring or already accomplished writers in English. So I would say that people who write in English in Pakistan have to try to understand the larger literary landscape and make connections with writers of other languages and readers of other languages. And I think your, as I said, that your habitat actually enriches your work. I mean, you have to be rooted somewhere, and then you can branch out anywhere you wish.
Thank you so much for your time, Haris Saab, and I'm certain our viewers must have learned a lot from today's interview. I would like to remind my viewers that The Bridge is an absolute platform that is striving to facilitate the amateur as well as published writers, and there is an abundance of creative writing exercises and challenges available on The Bridge's website, and you can visit that website for more information. And there will be more exciting conversations on this platform. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much again, Haris Saab.
Thank you, Taha, and thank you, the Bridge team. And it was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you. Thank you.